Why hello there. What are you all doing in my house? What do you mean I called you all here today? And that's my opening spiel with this show. Go back to your room. You're still grounded, young man, or woman, or non-binary individual. Actually, no, you can go ahead and stay. It's alright. Just like your parents would conveniently forget that you were grounded the single second Christmas or your birthday came around, it's time for Groovy Grab Bag, and that means I just forgot that you're grounded. The way this show works is I'm a giant music nerd, and every month I listen to between 25 and 40 albums. And because this show has gotten a bunch of traction around a lot of my social group, and I like to take musical recommendations from random people I just met in order to gain their validation and attention, that list keeps pushing towards 40 almost every single goddamn month. And what I do is I take all 40 of those albums and I rank them from worst to best. I try to keep in mind blockbuster releases. I usually incorporate the discographies of at least one artist per episode. This month I did 5, God fucking help me. And usually sprinkled in are recommendations from friends, fans that have done favors for the channel, and occasionally bad album challenges. But let's face it, this episode is gonna have a lot because this month is emo month. Yeah, I decided to tackle all 4 of the big 4 bands' discographies. So we're gonna include Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, My Chemical Romance, and Paramore. So you're gonna kind of see who ranks mostly towards the bottom and who ranks mostly towards the top. Let's get this list started because we got a lot of ground to cover and I decided to be extra snarky during the opener, so yeah. We gotta move. Number 40, Till the Wheels Fall Off by Curve. With all the Scene Kid music I've been covering this month, you would expect some crunkcore to make its way in for my bad album challenges. And it might seem like a low-hanging fruit situation, as most crunkcore bands are already bullied to begin with, but let's face it, most crunkcore bands know they're garbage. And that makes it kind of hard to lean into throwing them into the F tier. It's only when they take themselves too seriously that you end up getting really annoyed with them. But not Curve. Oh man. Curve is like the dweeb who is so dweeby that the other dweebs won't let him sit at the dweeb table. And not because of some unspoken bully dynamics, but because the dweeb just so happens to be a huge creep even by dweeb standards. I have this friend named Charlie who has a real big soft spot for a lot of the crunkcore bands. But when I mentioned that I was listening to a Curve album, I got an unsolicited phone call with him asking me if I was okay. It sounded like he was trying to talk me out of jumping off a bridge or something. So you might be thinking, how bad is this? Oh, it's fucking atrocious. I promise you that. First off, even the beats on here are lazy, even by crunkcore standards. At least when it comes to most crunkcore, we can say that they were trying to cater to that club crowd. But I can honestly tell you, I cannot see this thing playing in clubs. First off, because those vocals are so fucking atrocious, but we'll come back to that. But second off, because these beats were clearly written in fucking Fruity Loops by some guy who had the balls to call himself a composer. For those of you who are either too young or have forgotten what I'm talking about, that's basically the 2009 equivalent of asking an AI prompt to write your music for you. And look, I'm not anti-using technology as a tool, but when you use it as a crutch like this, yeah, it's pretty fucking insulting. But you're not even using it as a good crutch. Like, listen to these goddamn beats and tell me that they're actually catchy. But the biggest problem is with the lead vocalist of Curve, someone of whom I'm not gonna give the dignity of mentioning his name. First off, I hope you like hearing the F slur, because this guy's gonna say the F slur so many fucking times that even most other crunkcore bands are saying, okay buddy, settle the fuck down. This guy's gonna tell you to suck his dick so much that even gay porn stars are saying no thanks. And let's not forget those lame-ass pop cultural references, including one incredibly lame moment where he starts quoting "I'm Too Sexy" by Right Said Fred. Speaking of Fred, this album is like if Fred, like the YouTuber Fred, not my former parrot Fred, decided to make an entire crunkcore album. And if Fred has spent way too much time on 4chan. Probably one of the most awkward moments on this thing is during the song Dirtbag, which starts out with this down-tempoed sample of Wheatus's Teenage Dirtbag, a song of which has been getting a bit of a second life in the past few years, and I just don't understand why. But hey, at least that version is listenable, unlike this fucking sample and then everything else he slathers on top. And yeah, this is a bit of an overused joke by me, but the vocals are about as intimidating as a toddler playing with his G.I. Joe action figures whenever he brings out Cobra Commander. Listen, this album is just absolute fucking garbage, and I could go on for hours about it, but we got a lot more albums we gotta cover, and not a lot of time to do it. F. Number 39, Viva Las Vengeance by Panic at the Disco. Guys, this fucking thing here, this fucking album, just Jesus fucking Christ. Look, I get it. Some Panic at the Disco stans are gonna be wondering what the hell I'm smoking to rank this album this low. I wanted to be forgiving to this thing because I saw that the critics quite liked it. But when I saw that fan reception, and especially some of the comments on the YouTube videos for this album, I just started to realize, oh shit, is this one of those situations where the critics are out of fucking touch? Oh yes, it's one of those situations where the critics are out of fucking touch. Look, a lot of critics have been trying to be nicer to the big four emo bands. If we're talking Paramore or even Fall Out Boy, I can understand that, but Panic at the Disco hasn't been good since at least 2010. It's just been this slow downwards trajectory to absolute fucking trash. Because Brendan Urie had to push everyone away. His look at me little personality. I am so good. I am the best musician and one of the greatest entertainers you will ever see in your lifetimes. Watch me do a backflip while singing, guys. And while that will probably wow an audience during a live performance, and that can kind of create a sense of attachment to Brendan Urie and the Panic at the Disco name, without that sense of attachment, without that illusion, this album is quite fucking hard to listen to. And it's not because of ineptitude or bad performances, it's because this thing is artistically fucking bankrupt to a fault. Yes, I said artistically bankrupt to a fault, because some artistically bankrupt shit can still at least be listenable. And of course, context really helps you start to hate this thing a lot more. In recent years, Brendan Urie has been accused of a lot of shit that he has been trying to cover his own ass for. And this whole time, he's still trying to boost up his own ego rather than trying to take a few steps back and maybe looking at the world he's kind of created around him. This guy will say he's incredibly thankful for his fans and then proceed to let his security team do whatever they want to them. I'm not making that up. Google it. Although I should still say allegedly when it comes to this, just so that way I don't get sued. This thing wants to be the new greatest rock record of all time. And sure, the compositions harken back to the good old days of 1970s with its Queen homages. And I'm sorry, but Brendan Urie is no Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury was a tenor with a capital T, whose voice shot up naturally into the stratosphere. Every time Urie starts trying to belt way up there, he is clearly pushing his voice. Granted, he sounds better when he strains than most people do, but he is still straining. And there's some studio trickery going on this thing. There's tons of little hints of auto-tune and pitch shifting in order to delude you into believing that this man has a bigger vocal range than he actually does. Look, guys, it is okay to have a lower vocal register. If you keep straining your voice like that, you're gonna go into your late 30s and early 40s with a lot of pain. And I know that this comment section is probably going to get littered with at least one or two r/singing vocalists that think that they're God's gift to humanity. I'll see you back in about 10 to 15 years, buddy. And that's the biggest problem with this album, is that it's a reflection of Brendon Urie's insecurities. Into his late 30s, Brendon Urie should be polishing his personality. He should be doing a lot of reflecting. I'm 35 and I feel like I've made more changes to better myself than someone like Brendon has. And yeah, a lot of that is chalked up to fame. But we're gonna talk about these other bands as we go along, and idols such as Hayley Williams and Gerard Way have done a lot more reflecting and have kind of earned their maturity over time. This thing just feels so inauthentic, it's so out of touch, it's so behind the times. It wants to pay homage to old-timey forms of rock, but it neither has any methods of innovation, nor does it have the love for that medium that bands like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard have in order to get away with it. F+. Number 38, Wolverine Destroyer by the Dead Schembechlers. I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, what the hell is this shit? So there I was, scrolling through the various one-star reviews on AllMusic, just trying to find some albums that I can cover whenever I need a bad album challenge. But the problem is that you can't really review a lot of these because they're just dollar store bin karaoke compilations, badly recorded bootlegs of legendary artists, thoughtless compilations slapped together with low bitrate MP3s. But every now and then I see something kind of mentioned in there and I'm all like, huh, what the hell is this? And when I found Wolverine Destroyer, I had to look it up, and yeah, Spotify has it, and I looked up the history of this band, and Jesus Christ, are you guys in for a wild ride? Because here you go. So the Dead Schembechlers are a band that exists for the sole purpose of making Michiganders feel bad for themselves when it comes to their stupid little rivalry with Ohio State. It's edgy humor with a hardcore punk backdrop, whose songs range from lazy originals to Weird Al style parodies. But instead of clever, stupid little dad puns, we get songs about carpet bombing Michigan. Yay! Yeah, because only in 2005 could you get away with making jokes about genociding an entire state all over a sports rivalry. Yeah, I'm sure some of you guys are laughing your asses off at such a concept existing. Maybe you even played one of these songs and you're like, what are you talking about? This is hilarious. But try listening to all 28 minutes of this thing. It gets really fucking repetitive and old fast. Look, there's only so many times that we can talk about Bo Schembechler, who, by the way, is the former coach of Ohio State basketball and football, having kicked the lead singer's dog, which I don't think that actually happened. I'm pretty sure it's just a stupid joke. Or, better yet, all Michigan women being STD-riddled whores. Not my quote, that's their words. Yeah, let's just throw in some misogyny with the genocide while we're at it. And look, I don't hate these guys all too much. When Bo Schembechler died in 2008, I want to say, they ended up donating a bunch of funds to charities that would honor Bo Schembechler. This was supposed to be all in good fun. And sure, the musicianship is a little bit on point, but that production is super flat, and like I said, that joke gets old super fast. Maybe if these guys had a bit more range to their lyrics, and maybe if this thing was a bit more polished or gritty, we'd have something maybe a little bit better on our hands. But if you want comedic punk albums, I have a list of at least 10 other releases that are better than this thing. D-. Number 37, I'm Not a Fan, But the Kids Like It by Broken Side. Oh, yay. I get to talk about Broken Side again. Last time we left off with Broken Side, I had listened to one of the worst albums ever created. So how did we go from the dredges of the bottom of the list to, you can do worse? Well, first off, you do have to admit that Broken Side realized what their shtick was and how to market to that shtick better than a lot of other bands do. Sure, these vocalists fucking suck, but hey, if you're gonna game the system, might as well do it smart. And occasionally, some of these beats, I will be guilty to admit, are a little fun. They're not great, but hey, I can bop my head mildly to them. And yeah, the vocals still make me want to go run into traffic screaming. But at least now they're not recorded by cupping the microphone like the previous one. So at least they polished the shitty vocals this time, I guess. But the bigger thing is that this thing doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows it's a stupid party jams album for a bunch of misogynistic scene kids. But look, these guys have strangely kind of matured over the years. Their music is still absolute fucking dreck, don't get me wrong. But they've had a surprising ability to be able to reflect on this shit better than Brendan Urie does, where he just lies to himself and says that he's always been wholesome. But no matter how much you try to sprinkle in the self-awareness with all the edited in lines of record producers saying, what the hell is this shit, this better sell, it's still trash. I mean, this is still very lowbrow. Whoever thought that, like, club music would go well with screamed vocals? Like, who is this marketed for? You know, you take some of the biggest schlock from the 2000s, even butt rock, shit like Creed and Nickelback, stuff that I still don't like. Those movements are getting recognition nowadays because at least there's some semblance of good songwriting, and calling that music like the worst thing you've ever heard is maybe a little bit disingenuous, but I have never met anyone that is actually unironically enjoying crunkcore in the 2020s. I don't have much else to say. I'm just kind of bewildered that these guys have lasted as long as they have. D. Number 36, Pray for the Wicked by Panic at the Disco. Not only have I not mentioned any of the other bands yet, but I haven't even mentioned the Rod Stewart album I listened to this month. And I'm already 2 albums deep into Panic at the Disco. Oh boy, you could probably tell how much I love them. Man, this thing is just rah-rah stadium rock. I don't have anything else to say about it. It made my headphones rattle, and that's usually a bad sign because it's just a sign of loudness war production. And you know what really sucks is that the song High Hopes is now the most played Panic at the Disco track. So whenever youngins are hearing about Panic at the Disco and they're curious, they don't go finding like the highest played track being I Write Sins Not Tragedies, which is unironically a banger of a song. No, they're more likely to hear I got high hopes for a living. Yeah, I know I just sang that flat. I don't care enough about that song to do it justice. Yeah, this album is just very empty-headed, Imagine Dragons coded. God, do we not need more Imagine Dragons in this day and age? This is a far cry from anything that Panic at the Disco did well in their early years. It's just Brendan Urie at this point. Yeah, he kind of chased away the rest of the band, and the band moniker just became a vehicle for him because he knew he probably wouldn't be able to sell enough records with just his name attached. Thank God he finally came to his senses and ended it a couple of years ago. But I just don't have that much to say. These songs are forgettable, they're bland, it's boring, it's dull. D+. Number 35, Thanks for the Memory, The Great American Songbook, Volume 4 by Rod Stewart. Psych! Bet you thought this was a Fall Out Boy mention. Nope. By the way, this lined up by sheer fucking coincidence. I didn't do this on purpose. Boy, oh boy, would I rather be listening to Fall Out Boy than listening to this fucking dreck. But what's really weird is that this is probably the least bad Great American Songbook record. And that's saying quite a lot because this is actually quite frequently touted as Stewart's worst album. And okay, maybe in essence I can see that because this is the umpteenth time he's just covering these songs straight without doing anything new with them. And it also has the least amount of celebrity cameos, which makes it even less interesting. Yeah, there's no moments where we're suddenly getting Bette Midler shoved in our faces. I mean, there's a track with Elton John on it, and yeah, this is post-vocal nodes Elton John, so he's just kind of awkwardly grunting his way through the song. And it's easily the cringiest moment on here, because there's one moment where Elton says, "You hear that, Rod?" And then Rod says back, "Damn tootin' I do, Elton." or something like that. I don't actually know the right line for it, but I don't care. I'm not re-listening to it to get it right. But the problem with this album is that it's not maddeningly bad enough. It's just really bland and forgettable, and strangely more confident than the predecessors. Rod, please don't get this formula down to a T. I don't want to keep listening to these. I don't know, I was expecting to have one of the worst albums I've listened to all year. But instead, all I got was something just kind of disappointing and underwhelming in multiple different ways. C-. Number 34, Death of a Bachelor by Panic at the Disco. Yeah, I still haven't even mentioned any of the other bands yet. Although this one was more on the entertaining side of bad, but unfortunately for me, it had a couple of decent-ish moments sprinkled in to keep it out of the D tier. Yeah, I hate it when Brendan Urie occasionally actually farts out a good beat or two here and there. But the thing that made me really want to scream into the abyss was the lyrical content on this. Whenever Brendan doesn't sound like Frank Sinatra doped out of his mind on NyQuil, he's too busy giving us weird little lyrical jabs that would make Adam Levine of Maroon 5 say, "Okay, buddy, I know you're crazy, but calm the fuck down." But the difference is that Adam Levine isn't trying to make some sort of important art. Adam Levine knows what lane he's playing in. Brendan Urie doesn't. One of the cringiest lyrical moments on this is when he's quoting an insult from a woman that tells him, "You think you're Brian Wilson, but you're more like Mike Love." And he takes it as a compliment. Like, yeah, I know, I'm a crazy genius, right? By the way, you want to know how much of a sack of shit Mike Love is? Just look up the footage of the 1992 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This album is just fucking stupid with some decent-ish moments sprinkled in. I don't want to give it too much attention. C-. Number 33, American Beauty / American Psycho by Fall Out Boy. Finally, we talk about one of the bands that isn't Panic. You know, when my friend Randy asked me to cover the Fall Out Boy discography, I was like, oh great, I'm gonna hate the vast majority of this. But it turns out that no, Fall Out Boy isn't that insulting to your intelligence. Not like Panic at the Disco. Fall Out Boy at their worst is just rah-rah stadium rock. I know I was just bitching about that with the Panic at the Disco release, but at least this doesn't pretend to be important in any sort of way. This is pretty far removed from what we know Fall Out Boy to be. Their post-reunion discography is just kind of underwhelming, to say the least. Both this and the following album sound very similar, and it was hard for me to decide which one I disliked more. And I don't even really dislike them enough to, like, go on a rant. But then I remembered this is the one with Uma Thurman in it, which is easily the worst Fall Out Boy song. And that became the deciding factor towards which one ranked lower. Look, this thing is just kind of forgettable. It comes and goes. It didn't make me scream into the ether. It didn't make me jam out to it. It just made me say, wow, that certainly was 45 minutes of music. C+. Number 32, Mania by Fall Out Boy. Yeah, that album title stylization isn't going to be the stupidest example of this for the entire video, but it is really stupid. Look, I'm sorry, but nobody is going to have an existential realization just because you decided to capitalize every other letter in your title or whatever. And yeah, that's about all I have to say about this. This is just more rah-rah stadium rock, but maybe just a little bit less bad because this doesn't have Uma Thurman on it. Just cut and paste the comments I made about the previous album and place them here. What, lazy? Don't call me lazy. I'm not the one that's gonna sit here wasting your time by doing the same thing over and over again. Bitch at Fall Out Boy for that. C+. Number 11, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die by Panic at the Disco. What the hell does that even mean? Look, this is the last album that featured any of the original lineup from Panic at the Disco. Spencer Smith left not long after. I don't blame him. I would have been driven to substance abuse myself if I had to deal with Brendan Urie. Here's the problem with this album. I don't fucking remember it. No, seriously, I don't. Usually my memory's pretty good when it comes to a lot of these, but this one just kind of came in one ear and out the other. Sure, it's probably not as bad as the others, I guess. All I remember is I gave it a C+, but I look back over this track listing and I'm all like, What did this thing fucking sound like again? Usually, even with the most forgettable experiences, I'm better about that because I remember how it made me feel. But I don't remember this making me feel anything. Not enough cringe, no surprisingly good moments, just kind of an average rock album. But yeah, one thing I will say I remember is that all of those interesting grooves from the previous album were taken away because Brendan Urie was driving Spencer Smith up the wall, basically saying, no, you gotta let me take control. I'm the one who knows what to do with this band. So we don't even get the interesting rhythms that made the previous one at least a little bit less insufferable. C+. Number 30, Save Rock and Roll by Fall Out Boy. Shh, guys, quiet. The Fall Out Boy songs, they become sentient. You know why? Because they know what I did in the dark. Also, somebody get a bucket of water because Patrick's stump is on fire. Alright, stupid jokes and references aside, this thing is actually surprisingly a little bit more enjoyable than the average Fall Out Boy records. I found myself charmed by its authenticity. Even if Fall Out Boy is incorporating a lot more electronic elements into their music now that they're back together, their attempts to try to keep rock music relevant are at least admirable. And also the song they did with Elton John in order to show queer solidarity was, at the very least, charming and believable, which is more than what we can say about some of the other bands. A little bit of this is dull, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't like this at least a little bit. B-. Number 29, Vices and Virtues by Panic at the Disco. Man, we are just steamrolling through these Panic albums, aren't we? This was their third album, and the first one to only feature Brendan and Spencer. Unfortunately, now that we don't have the lyrics by Ryan Ross, we're treated to the vaguely deep lyrics of Brendan. Basically, a whole lot of words that ultimately say nothing. So why do I like this one a little bit more than the previous ones? And that's because Spencer Smith was like a kid in the candy store on this. Sure, I don't care about Brendan's vocals. Sure, the lyrics are stupid. Sure, the melodies coming from the synthesizers and guitars are just kind of forgettable. But goddamn, is that rhythm section just funky enough to float this thing along? I don't want to waste too much of your guys' time by trying to come up with more to say about this than what's on the tin. B-. Number 28, Infinity on High by Fall Out Boy. I'm a stitch away from making it, and a scar away from falling apart. And it's all because all I've talked about over these last few entries is nothing but Fall Out Boy and Panic at the fucking Disco. But we're starting to enter into the better territory for both bands, and this album is where my compliments for Fall Out Boy start to come in a little bit more heavy. Some of the songs on here are just outright fucking bangers. I'm a little man, and I'm also evil, also into cats, also into cats. Thanks for the memories, guys. And all the memes, I guess I should say thanks for the memories. This is probably the most memed Fall Out Boy album. So many misheard lyrics videos from back in the day. But those songs still slap, even if they don't slap as hard as the songs from their previous album. And this thing has what is my favorite Fall Out Boy song, The Afterlife of the Party. A song which is about a dear friend of theirs that was suffering from really bad drug withdrawals. And you know what? Sometimes I cry a little bit when I hear it. Good job, Patrick Stump and Pete Wentz. You actually put emotions into me. But here's the thing. This album tastes like Fall Out Boy, but sweeter, and not necessarily in a good way. Where my compliments end for this thing is that this album's production is a little bit softer around the edges, a little bit more R&B infused. But also it was because the emo scene was dying, and it was because of one big black parade-shaped shadow that was looming over the entire industry. So it was an attempt to try to gain a unique identity, so to speak. I wouldn't say it backfired, it just didn't work as strongly as the band had hopes. Although I know some people for whom Infinity on High is the best Fall Out Boy album for those reasons. Because Fall Out Boy would never sound this soft around the edges again. It's a good enough listen. Some of the songs ended up on my all-time playlist of songs that I listen to when I'm just kind of existing. But I'm not gonna come back to the full album anytime soon. B. Number 27, Don't Tap the Glass by Tyler, the Creator. Listen here, Tyler, the next time you stealth drop an album in the middle of a month where I'm already reviewing 39 fucking albums and making me have to push it up to 40, I'm going to smash the glass. Oh, thank fuck I'm talking about something that isn't Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. Look, overanalyzing this thing is just gonna make a bunch of the Tyler bros come into your comments section saying it ain't that deep, bro. And that's the thing, that's both the good thing and the bad thing about this album. It's a catharsis album for Tyler after doing these high concepts back to back. He just needed something that was just party music. And you know what? That's fine. It's probably his weakest album since Cherry Bomb, but I'm okay with it, because Cherry Bomb wasn't even all that bad to begin with. These are just fun little bouncy songs, little brainless, but hey, I don't have much else to say. B. Oh, thank God I finally talked about something different. I wonder what's next. Number 26, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out by Panic at the Disco. God fucking damn it! I am so sick and tired of talking about these two bands back to back. I prefer a more spread out mention of bands. But no, Panic had to be mostly garbage. Alright, this is an album that a lot of people consider an all-time classic because of how iconic it was. These guys had such a unique sound that their MySpace numbers were through the roof, and Pete Wentz of Fall Out Boy was all like, no, we gotta get these guys signed like yesterday. What do you mean they've never played a live show before? I don't care, sign them up. And the result is exactly what you would expect when you get together a bunch of legendarily good musicians that haven't fully fleshed out all of their musical ideas yet. First off, I'm just gonna say thank you, Ryan Ross, for keeping Brendan Urie on a goddamn leash for the first two records. Because at least he's vocally tolerable on here, and while the lyrics are just a tinge melodramatic for their own good, at least I can chalk that up to you being in your teenage years and trying to sound deep. I will also say that I Write Sins Not Tragedies is a legendary moment in popular music. Yeah, that song, even a Panic hater like myself, I have to admit that's a good one. The biggest problem with this album is for all of its musical highs and the great musicianship that causes this thing to turn on a dime, it does feel like it has a bit of ADHD where it's constantly jerking you around in new directions before you've gotten the chance to fully enjoy some of these tracks. You go from legitimate hard rock bangers to weird Tom Waitsy cabaret stuff, which are both done very well on here. And then you get the electronic garbage tracks, which sound so fucking atrocious, I'm sorry. Oh, God. At least now I know why Attack Attack sounded the way they did, but at least when Attack Attack did it, it was funny bad. When Panic at the Disco does it, it just makes me want to smash my head through a glass window. Look, I get it, this thing is beloved, and I'm sure some commenters are gonna pop in telling me that, oh, you don't get the genius that this album was, and therefore you shouldn't be commenting on it. I don't care, it's my video, it's my opinions, B. Number 25, by Kesha. Yeah, no, that's not a typo on your screen there. It's literally the title of the album. It's supposed to be called Period. Yeah, a lot of the artwork for this album is also fucking stupid. Like, we get these interesting little visuals, but it's being blocked out by this pink dot. It's supposed to be some sort of commentary on feminism, I guess? I don't know, I don't fully get it. These album covers were made by AI, and yeah, that's pretty gross, but at least Kesha kind of backpedaled on that a bit, which is more than we can say about artists like fucking Kanye West, who are just unapologetically garbage about it. And yeah, Kesha gets way more hate than she deserves. That being said, this album isn't great. It's good in some places, like the songs are enjoyable enough, I guess. And also the attempts to try to lean into hyperpop are just a little bit misguided, though they're nowhere near as bad as an artist like Rebecca Black. I would just say that this thing is just an average pop record that's trying to reinvent itself and not doing the best job at it. B. Number 24, Take This to Your Grave by Fall Out Boy. Yeah, I know, this is one of the most beloved pop-punk records in the past 20 to 25 years. Look, we're gonna chalk this one up to maybe Randy just isn't the biggest fan of punk in general. Of course, there are punk albums that I absolutely fucking love, but the biggest problem I have with punk is that unless I listen to an album like 50 times in a row to make it possible for me to discern all the individual tracks. A lot of the time, these albums just kind of fuse together for me, because they're using a lot of the same 4 chords, maybe the vocals alternate a little bit, maybe the rhythm's just slightly different from the previous one. And that's what a lot of people like about some pop-punk music, is that they can tell those little subtle variations. My brain doesn't pick up on it all too well. That being said, I do see why this thing is beloved. This was kind of the seeds planted for Fall Out Boy's eventual superstardom. Their lyrics are really well written on here, to the point where the band would just like start saying, guys, fucking stop. We're just a bunch of guys driving around the country in a white van. So I can kind of see where the passion is coming from. So if somebody told me that this was their favorite Fall Out Boy record, I'm not gonna argue with them. Who am I to yuck their yum on this? I don't ever like yucking somebody's yum. And at least I can kind of see where they're coming from, unlike a lot of the other albums that are on this list. It's just not quite for me. And we'll see where I start to really praise Fall Out Boy, considering we got some real bangers coming up. B. Number 23, All We Know Is Falling by Paramore. Fucking finally, I talk about one of the other bands on this list. Jesus Christ. You know a band is good when the worst album they ever put out is just honestly their teenager album. Well, technically Paramore has 2 teenager albums, but we'll get to the other ones soon. I feel like with these early Paramore records, you had to have kind of been there in order to be nostalgic enough for them to like them. The instrumentation on this is still great for a bunch of barely out of high schoolers, or still in high schooler when it comes to Haley's case. And I will say, even at the age of 15, Haley's got some really good pipes on her. And the guitar work, there's some really nice push and pull in the dynamics here. The biggest issue with this is that this does kind of feel like small fries in comparison to the better Paramore albums on this list. And there's nothing wrong with small-scale problems, but they're coming from the perspective of a teenager. And as somebody who's well into his adult years, and again, I didn't grow up with this, it can be a little bit hard to grasp, but at least I can appreciate her attempts to write something that means something to her. And for the people that grew up with this, yeah, it means something to you even to this day. God knows I have my records that I still clutch onto for dear life that I liked as a teenager. So I won't blame you for liking this too much, but Paramore would go on to bigger and better things. B. Number 22, Danger Days, The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys by My Chemical Romance. Not to be a killjoy when it comes to this record, but this is the one MCR album that I did not put up into the A tier. Not that it goes without trying, this album has plenty of banger-ass songs on them, but this is My Chemical Romance leaning more into like their anthemic sound. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I know some people for whom this is better than the Black Parade. They're wrong, but for them it's still better than the Black Parade. I think the biggest problem with this album is that despite its sonic change, it doesn't quite feel like it's in line with the first 3 MCR records. Sure, I'm gonna like the vast majority of it, but I don't have that special emotional connection to it like I do albums like Bullets and 3 Cheers. And that's because this album's concept takes a little bit too much weight on this. It feels like MCR were confused as to what to do after the monster hit of the Black Parade. And that's understandable. They wanted to go with something even heavier in its concepts. But in its execution, it's hard to really enjoy this unless you're attached to that concept. And most of the people that like Danger Days really like the plot and the concept of this album. Again, I'm not a man that's gonna yuck your yum when it comes to something like that. There's no crime in liking this. But for me personally, I'm gonna stop just short of saying a vast majority of the songs on this are really good, but they're far from the best that the band has to offer. B+. Number 21, Riot by Paramore. Man, you guys, some of you Paramore heads are going to be really upset that I don't like this one all that much. Look, we're in the B+ tier. Guys, please, I know I'm spoiling the rating already, but you should know what you're dealing with here. I still have mostly nice things to say about this. This is some really high energy, enjoyable pop punk music. Hayley Williams is out of her emotional teenage phase and is fully in her confident, in your face, your mother's a whore type of teenager mentality, if you will. And there's songs on here like fucking Misery Business, where it's just like, yeah, that song's still my jam, even if the lyrics aren't appropriate in the year of our Lord 2025. And songs like We Are Broken brings a little bit of a tear to my eye and kind of gives you a teaser for how emotionally deep this band would eventually get at their best. The biggest issue I have with this is, again, the band were comprised of at least half teenagers, including Hayley Williams herself, and some of these lyrics can feel very high school level. And now that Hayley Williams is a lot more confident in her abilities, rightfully so, nothing wrong with that confidence, the confidence mixed in with the immaturity can kind of give this album a bit of a tinge of, wow, this is very 2007 coded. For some people, this thing is still timeless because sonically it can blow your brains out at its best moments. But that being said, I'm not the biggest fan of this, and I think Paramore as a band got better as their lineup and sound kind of evolved into a different beast. B+. Number 20, So Much for Stardust by Fall Out Boy. I'll give these guys credit. When they listen to their fans, they really listen to their fans. After 3 kind of stadium rock-driven albums, Fall Out Boy finally decided to return to their roots. A little bit. It's a little complicated. But this thing is much better than anything they've done in at least the last decade and a half. We got some genuinely good hooks here, some really clean energy, and while we're still leaning a little bit into the stadium rock side of things, it's still done with enough authenticity that you can tell that there was a little bit more of Fall Out Boy's heart in this album than there was their previous 2. I will definitely say that this thing is trying its best to party, but it's starting to realize that the world's getting a little weird. They're sad that fascism is taking over the world, but it's more because they know that it's going to end the party more than anything. And that's where I have such a soft spot for this album, because even though these songs come and go sometimes, the hooks are just that much tighter. And I feel like I kind of agree with the fans that this is the best that Fall Out Boy has sounded in quite some time. Got a lot more albums to talk about, so I'm gonna wrap this up and say B+. Number 19, You Know What I'm Saying by Danny Brown. Look, I told you Mania wasn't gonna be the stupidest formatted title for this entire video. No, because we just had to have the upside down question mark and everything shoved into one word. Look, I'll give Danny Brown this much. At least the title kind of serves a purpose, because Danny Brown's whole shtick is his mental illness and that kind of seeping its way into the music, and having a title stylized like this kind of leans into that a little bit. This was a fan request by that same guy who struck gold during Queer Month, and now we're back into the B tier again with his recommendations. One thing I will say is that I'm giving things a spin that I've been meaning to give a spin, and I've heard nothing but good things about Danny Brown, and yet I've never heard any of his music. There are a number of things that this album does well. Its beats are creepy and also catchy at the same time. After Danny Brown's previous album, which is considered his masterwork, he decided to lean in a bit more of a comedic direction. And while there are some times when the jokes hit, some of the other jokes just don't quite do it for me. Especially when they're centered around a bit of toilet humor. And look, I'm a guy that likes his toilet humor every now and then, especially if you've bothered to read the flavor text at the end of each section of the video. But something about Danny Brown's really nasally delivery just kind of makes it a bit unpleasant to listen to. And I think that that might be the point for some of the fans of this album. And while the delivery doesn't always tickle my fancy, I did find myself enjoying quite a few of these creepy ass beats. But hey, I finally got to experience Danny Brown, even if it's not necessarily the best entry point into his work. Maybe I'll end up liking this a bit more with some more context surrounding it. But on its own, while I did like some moments in it, I feel like maybe Danny Brown's delivery is going to be a point of contention for me. And that makes me sad, because I don't like saying that about otherwise beloved artists. B+. Number 18, After Laughter by Paramore. Yeah, the story of Paramore isn't just an upwards climb to the S tier for me. It kind of goes back and forth between albums that didn't entirely click for me and albums that I actually found myself surprisingly enjoying. After Laughter for me was an album that I had a pleasant enough time listening to, with it being probably the most synth-pop driven album that Paramore has ever done. After some even more hectic band drama between albums, this thing was finally shot out in 2017 to critical acclaim. But for me, I don't know, the synth-pop direction, while funky and catchy and nice sounding sometimes, just kinda lacks a little bit of that edge that makes Paramore at their best work so strongly. It's one of those albums that you dance along to, but you do so knowing full well that you could be dancing to something even more good than this. I mean, hell, this isn't even the grooviest Paramore will ever sound, and they do sound better when there's a level of intensity behind that groove. Unfortunately, Hayley's voice, while still good, is a bit too Taylor Swift tinged in this era. It feels like she's a little restrained, and maybe for some people that might come across as refined, and that's fine. But for me personally, I prefer Paramore with a bit more edge and grit to them. B+. Number 17, Indulgence, A Saga of Lights by Sycamore. That is the stupidest band name I have ever seen in my life. Get it? Because it's like the tree, but we put amor at the end of it, so it's kind of romantic at the same time. Get it, guys? We're so fucking smart. You know, that stupid band name really should have placed these guys much lower on the list. This should have been in with the Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco Monotony in the C tier, especially with such mature sounding song titles like Shut the Fuck Up. But no, they had to go and be actually good musicians and deliver some really badass metalcore. Like, these guys wear their influences on their sleeves, whether that's coming from Panic at the Disco with the use of electronic bits, or the passionate vocal delivery that is somewhat inspired by both Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance, the various breakdowns influenced by both Converge and Killswitch Engage. I, for the most part, ended up enjoying this, and again, these guys have some genuinely great musicianship. This album was recommended by my friend Matt because it's the closest thing he could think of to recommend that wasn't just part of the big four emo bands. But I ended up enjoying myself, and I'm really glad. The only downside with this album is that they also like to wear a Day to Remember influence on their sleeves, and that means we get those cheesy Cookie Monster-esque guttural vocals. And what makes it even worse is they combine it with those really shrill, high-pitched screams, and whenever that's done, it just sounds like it's ripped out of a really bad mid-2000s level haunted house. You know, the type where the guy just chases you outside the door 20 feet way too far and ends up sending you into a panic attack, and then the company gets sued. Those are the type of vibes that this album gives you at its absolute worst, and it's only because of those vocals. Other than that, this thing was pretty phenomenal, and I wish I could give it a higher grade, but those vocals ding it down quite a bit. A-. Number 16, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance. Yeah, this was the album that shot MCR into the stratosphere, made them basically a household name overnight. They formed after seeing the 9/11 terrorist attacks happen, and within the first year they had their first album out, and just a measly 2 years after that, I'm Not Okay, I Promise made its way onto rock radio, and yeah, nothing's been the same ever since. You know what's really interesting is that this album does have a concept around it. Yeah, a lot of people are unaware of that. Most people know that the Black Parade and Danger Days have those concepts, but a lot of people go through like 20, 30 years before they realize that 3 Cheers has a storyline. But what I like about the best MCR albums is that you don't have to dig the concept to dig the album. This thing has some great pacing, and while maybe not all of the songs are the best in the MCR catalog, quite a few of them are. I mean, Helena being an homage to the Ways' grandmother who had just passed away prior to the release of the album. You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison being probably one of the best Jailbreak songs songs ever written. Ghost of You resonating with post 9/11 America better than anything Toby Keith ever farted out. It's got some really high highs, and the lows, they're not that low, but they definitely do keep me from placing this into the higher echelons of the A tier or even the S tier. A-. Number 15, Self-Titled by Paramore. Man, this band has survived so much fucking drama, it's not even funny. It might not be Fleetwood Mac levels of drama, but it's up there. And the good news is that they don't have any Anthony Kiedis's in their group to taint their reputation like the Red Hot Chili Peppers do. So I can sit here and admire their ability to make it through turmoil without feeling like I belong on a watch list of some sort. The fact that this album exists is a miracle in and of itself. 2 key band members left between the previous album and this one. And sonically, this is where things start to take a weird little left turn for Paramore fans, where the fanbase starts to split directly down the middle. For some, this was a continuation of what made them great, even if it was a bit more hooky and poppy than the previous albums. For others, this was a stab in the back to the people that prefer albums like Brand New Eyes and Riot. Look guys, I'm sorry, but this thing has some hella good songs on it. Ain't It Fun's one of the best rock songs written in the last 10 to 15 years, and you're not gonna change my mind on it. Think I'm wrong? Go to karaoke, there's gonna be somebody singing that song, and you're gonna be clapping your hands and singing along by the very end. Otherwise, you just don't have a fucking soul. And then there's the song Still Into You, which remains to be one of my favorite Paramore songs. It's one of those love songs that comes from a place of maturity. It's the type of love song where you know the two people have been through some shit and they don't completely romanticize their experience, but they still dig each other oh so much. And call it me being in my mid-30s, but I just appreciate that shit a bit more as I get older, even though I'm still single. My problem with this album is its length. Easily being the longest out of any of the albums by the big 4 bands that I'm reviewing in this episode. While I don't think it's impossible for Paramore to give us a great 60+ minute long album, I do think that including ukulele interludes and some of these songs being as long as they are is just unnecessary. If you remove all of those intros and shave off the lengths of some of the longer tracks, you'd have a very solid 45 to 50 minute long album. But yeah, this thing is pretty gosh darn solid despite its length. A-. Number 14, Pretty Odd Panic at the Disco. There you have it. I just mentioned every single Panic at the Disco album, and this was the only one I can say I genuinely enjoyed from start to finish, for the most part. This album was absolute hell for the band. Brendan Urie and Spencer Smith wanted to take things in a more punk direction like the previous album, and Ryan Ross wanted to take the band in a more 60s psychedelia direction. And Ross almost won out. You can definitely hear those influences a lot heavier on this thing. Let me just say, this is the best Brendan Urie has ever sounded. It's restrained, it's in his range. Brendan Urie is a baritenor, and there is nothing wrong with that. This is the type of croon that a lot of people swoon over, and that's perfectly fucking fine. And not to mention the lyrics on this. Oh my god, Ryan Ross. Are you trying to seduce me? These are actually really good. Yeah, they're paying homage to the Beatles and the Beach Boys, but this is clearly much closer to your calling than anything you did on the previous record. The biggest issue I have with this album is that, again, it's fucking got musical ADHD. We're herking and jerking ourselves around so many different ideas, and what's shocking is that this album is 48 minutes long. That's a decent enough length, and yet I feel like these ideas aren't fleshed out enough. There aren't any bad musical ideas on here. I just wish that some of these songs were allowed to breathe a lot more before they decided to switch it up on us. And for some people, that's part of the appeal of Panic at the Disco, is that's kind of like the direction that music was moving in some ways. Hyperpop still has that sense of ADHD to this day, as you're about to see me bitch about. But I don't know, man, this is far from Panic at the Disco's weakest album, and I really wish that Brendan Urie didn't hijack this fucking thing. Because that's the biggest tragedy out of all of this, is Brendan Urie just completely pissed all over this band's legacy. And that just makes me sad, because we could have had a band kind of modernize this retro sort of sound. But instead, what we got is a band that peaked after the second album. Most of the most talented members left, and what we had left was a hell of a drummer that ended up getting ousted himself, and just Brendan Urie obsessing over his own reflection. A-. Number 13, Frailty by Jane Remover. Attention, dear viewer, do you have a really annoying person named Jane who lives with you? Introducing the Jane Remover. Get rid of that really annoying Jane within seconds. Just don't ask how it's done, kid. Alright, all jokes aside, this was the 5th artist that I failed to mention in my intro. I was initially just gonna cover the one album that kind of leans into the emo gaze, because I like giving shoegazers something to chew on even when I'm not covering a bunch of shoegaze. But when it turned out that in order to appreciate that album, you have to know what comes before and after it, I decided to just do the whole entire Jane Remover discography, which isn't a whole lot of albums. Frailty was the album that introduced Jane Remover to the world, and her penchant for constantly switching things up between gorgeous soundscapes that make you want to bawl out and cry to harsh noise that makes you want to put your head in a meat grinder. Jane Remover knows what the hell she's doing, even if I don't always completely dig it. This thing is sad, but it is very much sad in the I am 19 and still don't know what the hell I'm doing in life sort of sad. There are lyrics where it asks the question, maybe I wish I could be 16 again. But then it starts saying, do I really though? Because even that kind of sucked. There's this sense that she wants her life to be better, with all the gender dysphoria and late stage capitalism stress that she has to deal with. Shh, no one tell her that it doesn't ever get better. Not with capitalism, it doesn't. My biggest gripe with this album is with two things. Is that first off, the problem with me in the hyperpop genre in general is as much as I find some of the songs absolute bangers, sometimes it's just a little bit too shrill for my tastes. And then there's also the fact that I really wish this thing was sequenced out a bit better, because in order to listen to some of those really gorgeous segments of some of these songs, you have to sit through the segments that you might not enjoy as much. Which I get it, she's completely uncompromising, she's never gonna cater to her listeners like that, but I'm still gonna hold it against her. That being said, this thing is very admirable, it shows what Jane is capable of, and as she matures, she'll continue to get better. A-. Number 12, Folie à Deux by Fall Out Boy. I'm pretty sure I fucked that up. Tell me in the comments if I fucked that up. I've got troubled thoughts and a self-esteem to match. What a catch. Guys, I was not expecting to like this thing as much as I did. This is a fucking great and underappreciated album. My brother was obsessed with this thing, and I didn't have the best relationship with my brother. I still don't have the best relationship with my brother. But he listened to this thing so fucking much that I ended up hating it by proxy as a result. So imagine to my surprise when I do a Fall Out Boy deep dive, and this ends up becoming my second favorite Fall Out Boy album. You know what's interesting is that this was released just a mere months after the previous record, which can be a bit of a trip because sometimes that means that bands are like chiseling out their material and it might not always be the best. But the fact that this is such a vast improvement over Infinity on High is just really impressive. This is still very much a stadium rock record, but it's the type of stadium rock that you want to come back to. The melodies are memorable, the edge is still there. They're able to express themselves both in soft emotional ways as well as give us some really great pop-punk bangers. And the fan base wasn't super receptive to it at the time of release. It felt like Fall Out Boy had fallen off the wagon a little bit, but fans these days really appreciate the risk-taking that Fall Out Boy had on here. Hell, I appreciate the risk-taking. Sure, it might not have any of the songs that make Fall Out Boy iconic, but you're gonna have at least 5, 6, 7 songs that you're gonna throw into your forever playlist if you're anything like me. A. 11. Census designated by Jane Remover. Here you go, here's your Emo Gaze album, shoegazing fans. Also, Jane, what the hell is up with that album title? You couldn't think of anything more interesting? You had to go with some obscure term used by, like, government employees? Whatever, it's one of those galaxy brain sort of things that Jane Remover likes to insert into her music. Alright, first off, I'm just gonna say it, this thing's goddamn gorgeous. The post-rock and the shoegaze elements of this album are just fucking chef's kiss. I'm not gonna complain at all about the instrumentation on here. It's borderline fucking perfect. The intensity is well earned on here, for the most part. We'll get to my little mild complaints. This is a vulnerable, devastating album, talking about emotional abuse from ex-lovers, talking about how hectic it is being so young and so vulnerable. Jane has this tendency to kind of grasp this emotional intensity that comes with youth, that very few artists tend to grasp in a way that doesn't come across as kind of try-hard. There's so many homages to 90s era rock that your Gen X grandpa just creamed his shorts. But I guess kind of what holds me back from thinking that this thing is a masterpiece are a couple of things. First off, this thing is way too long. Look, I know I just said that instrumentally this thing does pay off, but sometimes the lyrical and vocal directions can kind of extend those instrumentals longer than they need to be. And that's because Jane Remover is like giving us this concept, which, if I remember correctly, it's about a drunken teenager that's trapped in their house, sending a bunch of text messages, and just kind of emotionally trauma dumping on us for 63 minutes. And there's nothing wrong with that, but after a while, it feels like you're watching someone cry in the shower. Sure, it sucks that somebody goes through that and they need to be able to get their voice out, but there kind of needs to be a bit of restraint. And I guess that's part of the issue that I get with Jane Remover, even if it only dings their ratings down ever so slightly. But this is still a monster of an album. I would still recommend this to somebody that's been looking for good modern shoegaze. A. Number 10, Pilgrim by Jesse Wells. Listen here, Pilgrim. You should listen to this album. I'm John Wayne at the first Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Pilgrims. A new release, but not necessarily a blockbuster release. So why the hell is this thing here? Most of you guys have never heard of Jesse Wells. Well, it requires me to tell a bit of the story, so sit on down and I'll give you a scoop. What's that? It's called the Loop-de-Loop. So there I was at karaoke when one of my friends, Douglas, brought one of his friends, Jason. Jason has this really epic appearance about him. Long, luscious black hair and facial hair to match. And he said, you need to check out this Jesse Wells fella, man. He's like a modern day Bob Dylan, man. Maybe he didn't actually sound like that. So even though I was already overloaded with the number of listens I had, I had to insert this thing. I had to. Look, this guy does have a lot vocally in common with Bob Dylan. I mean, it's almost like a spitting fucking image. But he does have some things that separate him from Dylan. First off, he's somehow grumpier than even grumpy old man Dylan, so there's that. But he balances out that grit with some really gorgeous, polished orchestral arrangements. Part of my issue with a lot of Bob Dylan and a lot of folk in general is that sometimes it gets just a bit too twangy for my tastes. And this thing does have twang, but it's not overdone. Lyrically, this guy reminds me a lot more of Woody Guthrie than he does of Bob Dylan. And just as much of a leftist as Woody Guthrie was. This guy is mad about fascism, and he's gonna constantly remind you of it. If you're one of those people that hates wokeness in music, well, first off, bye-bye, you shouldn't be subscribed to me to begin with. But also, this guy is definitely not for you. It's a shame that this guy from Arkansas is so underappreciated, because he sounds like he deserves to have a much larger audience than he actually does. A. Number 9, Revenge Seekers by Jane Remover. Jesus fucking Christ, this album is wild. This thing is making the rounds as one of the best albums of the year. A lot of hyperpop fans are saying this is the one. This is 2025's Brat, basically. Except where Charlie XCX struts around in tight-fitting, feminine outfits, Jane Remover wears androgynous baggy clothes and is more likely to be found hanging out in an abandoned warehouse than out at the club. This just went completely unabashed hyperpop on us, and that's not a bad thing. It also has a bizarrely good ear for melody. For as much as this thing likes to sling shit at the walls and not apologize for it, there are some moments where I'm just like, damn, this is cooking. This thing is so fucking noisy. Even Death Grips would be telling Jane, settle the fuck down. But she won't. They know that she won't. This thing is designed to make all the boomers say, get away from the devil's music, kids, you don't need this. But it doesn't care, because we're all depressed right now. Thank you, capitalism. Thank you, fascism. This thing wants to party under the bridge downtown. And while the barrier of it being a hyperpop album will keep it out of my S tier, I will not argue with you if this is your S tier. A. Number 8, Filth Pig by Ministry. Man, I hang around so many fucking goths, and I can't tell you the number of times I have been told, man, you need to check out Ministry. And I keep saying, I would love to, but my listening schedule is filled to the brim with obscure Japanese artists you've never heard of. But sometimes you ask fans to do favors for your channel, and then you have to review an album in return, and that fan's all like, Filth Pig by Ministry. Thanks, buddy. Of course, you had to go with the difficult Ministry album that made most critics scratch their heads back in the day, but I still had a good time with it regardless. This thing was written back when lead vocalist was a drug-addled mess. And the thing that a lot of people struggle to grasp with when it comes to this album is the fact that it is very much not in line with the typical industrial stuff that Ministry is so beloved for. I've heard a good chunk of Ministry stuff before because I've been to a lot of goth dance parties at my local Surly Wench pub. This is more adjacent with sludge metal than it is with industrial goth music. It's still just as visceral as any other Ministry album, but it's visceral in a different way. Nowadays, this is up there with some of Ministry's best stuff, especially with its anti-American lyrics, a rarity in the Clinton administration because it saw right through the illusion of a booming economy. It can be a little bit messy and hard to piece together, but honestly, I didn't care. I liked the shit out of this, and I would gladly listen to this thing again, and now I'm excited to check out more of Ministry's discography in this year's spooky month. A. 7, Brand New Eyes by Paramore. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to like this thing as much as I actually did, but I'm so fucking glad I listened to this. This is easily my second favorite Paramore album. This thing is dramatic in all of the best ways. It's still youthful, and in many ways it's expressing the devastation of the slow dissolution of the band in ways that like a fucking 19-year-old would express that. But that's also part of what makes this so goddamn good. The devastation is done in a way that I can still relate to. I'm not against adolescent expression, I'm just not always gonna click with it when I'm in my mid-30s. But I've been in this situation before where all those people that you spent your high school years with are suddenly, like, now they're not getting along with you. And you have this sense of loyalty towards them. You want things to work out. You want to get over those awkward humps. But unfortunately, people change, and sometimes it's you that's changing, and it's them that are not changing. Or maybe you guys just had inconsolable differences that were just not addressed until now. Teenagers have this way of kind of hiding their worst aspects of each other to each other. But as you become an adult, those things start kind of bubbling up to the surface. And I feel like this album collects that energy perfectly. Hayley Williams is devastated that things aren't working out, but it's inevitable. This band is about to crumble, and she can't change it. It's this sense of helplessness that this album encapsulates almost perfectly. Out of the entire pop-punk era of Paramore, this is probably the height of it for me. Especially with tracks like All I Wanted Was You. Holy fucking shit, dude. I don't care how many singers I've heard at karaoke knock that thing out of the ballpark, they will never be able to sing it as great as Hayley Williams does. Which, yeah, I get it, no fucking shit, she's the original vocalist, but still. This thing is emotional, it's raw, there's tons of tension in it, and I love it. Hey. Number 6, From Under the Cork Tree by Fall Out Boy. And here we have it, the best Fall Out Boy record. Easily, hands down, you guys knew this was coming. Call me a basic bitch in the comments, I'm fine with it. I'm at peace with this being my favorite Fall Out Boy record. Look, these songs were written before the band exploded, but something in the guts of both Pete Wentz and Patrick Stump told them, we really need to get these people to settle the fuck down. Because even after Take This to Your Grave, the fans were obsessing. This has been said so many times that I'm not sure if it matters, but it must be said again that all us boys are just screaming into microphones for attention because we're just so bored. We never knew that you would pick it apart. Oh, I'm falling apart to songs about hips and hearts. I know that was a long lyrical reference, but it encapsulates Fall Out Boy to a T. They're just a bunch of dudes. They're just a bunch of bros. They don't want to be obsessed over. They want you to live a normal life without the weird parasocial dynamic between them and you. But somehow all that did was make all the fanboys and fangirls say, oh my god, they're so humble, I love them, marry me, Pete Wentz. And of course, this album just has so many bangers. The riffs on this thing are absolutely fucking killer. And there is a reason why some people consider this album to be a cultural milestone. We got Dance Dance, we got Sugar We're Going Down, we have that fucking amazing opening track. I'm sorry, I didn't memorize the track names for most of the albums that I listen to on here, because sure, I could be sitting here reading off of my scripts, but I feel like this is a lot more conversational and personal, and sometimes, like, track names just escape my brain, and I'm not about to stress myself out trying to remember them all. But Fall Out Boy makes it so much harder because their song titles, especially on this album, are just so obnoxiously long. They basically created a cult around them, and they just want to be left the fuck alone. Also, I wanted to apologize to Pete Wentz a little bit, because I don't know if I've ever said it on my channel, but I know I've said it on my social media profiles a couple of times. I've called him a groomer because I saw those stupid articles about the alleged 15, 16-year-old that dated Pete back in 2003. Well, it turns out that story is based off of a fucking fan fiction that Tumblr took seriously. Thanks, Tumblr, for ruining everything. Look, I'm usually going to believe the victims more often than not, but I felt really guilty enjoying some of these albums until I decided to do a bit more of a deep research into the origins of that story, and I found out that there's a reason why that this fucking accusation doesn't appear on Pete Wentz's Wikipedia page, and that's because it's bullshit. We got enough predators in pop punk as it is. We don't need to be falsely accusing people that don't fucking deserve it. And with that, I can gladly say that this episode's official title is Groovy Grab Bag Volume 17, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Fall Out Boy. A+. Number 5, Ghost Holding by Venturing. Yeah, I didn't say I was done with Jane Remover yet. Half the fan base is probably upset that I put Revenge Seekers at number 9 and that nothing ranked in the top 5. Meanwhile, the other half of the fan base is probably saying, wait, does this guy know about Venturing? Of course I know about Venturing. You think I didn't do my research? Okay, maybe a couple of these albums and artists I didn't do a full deep dive research into. Come on, I got 40 albums and dozens of artists to cover. I can't get it all down perfectly. See, Jane Remover started a second little musical project to kind of separate the brands between the people that prefer her more shoegazy stuff like on Census Designated and the people that like her more hyperpop sort of stuff like she did on Revenge Seekers. So that's what venturing is. This thing is so much more concise and to the point. No longer are we going on entire diatribes about trauma and stuff like that. I mean, she's still talking about her traumas, but she's doing so much more, like I said, concisely, which I think makes the emotional jabs that much more horrific. My favorite moment on here, I can't remember the name of the song, but she's basically like verbally crucifying a sexual predator, and you just don't hear that a whole lot lyrically. I mean, at least not from the stuff that I frequently listen to. I don't know about you Gen Zers right now, but it's got fucking balls, dude. Jane is an amazing musician, and I'm just really fucking glad I listened to this. Just copy and paste some of the compliments I gave Census Designated, but make it shorter, make it more to the point, and you basically got my thoughts on Venturing's first album. A+. Number 4, I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love by My Chemical Romance. Damn, 2 albums in the top 5, and this is my controversial pick for their second best. But goddamn, this is like almost Midwest emo levels of rawness. Look, I really like the way the vocals are produced on this thing. I'm a sucker for whenever a producer doesn't overdub the lead vocals, and I know in this case it was more of a budgetary constraint than it was an artistic choice, but listen to albums like Origin by Evanescence or The Celts by Enya, where the lack of overdub, at least in spots, is exactly part of what makes it sound so good. It's so naturalistic. Of course, if you don't have a producer that knows what they're doing otherwise, it can just sound like an absolute mess and you can't hear the vocalist. But luckily, that's not the case here. What I really like about this, and one thing I haven't mentioned about what makes emo so special across all of its variations, is that it's urgent. Even though this thing has a storyline that I can't remember the details to, you can feel the emotion seeping out of every single note that's played here. Because what makes emo so good, and especially MCR, is that this can't wait until tomorrow. I need to say what I have to say right now, and it is important. Plus the guitar lines and the energy on here, there's just something so tragic and yet empathetic about this album. A+, just an absolutely amazing listen, top to bottom. Number 3, The Greatest Generation by The Wonder Years. Lechi, stop giving me albums that end up ranking highly. You're a fellow autist like I. You gotta have some garbage you have to fling at me. You can't just keep giving me the top-notch shit. Yeah, no, this thing's absolutely fucking amazing. The musicianship is just so fucking good. These guys turn on a dime. When I say that, you know that these guys have that synergy where everything is just constantly fucking together. This thing is kind of like hardcore pop punk, and yes, that's a thing. But it's also coming from the perspective of somebody who has realized that they have been handed a shit sandwich in life, and there's no way out of it. You gotta eat the shit sandwich. Look, the boomers lied to us. They told us that even if we grow up living out of our cars, we can all grow up to be millionaires. Well, turns out that's not true. But okay. So I might not become rich or famous or anything like that, but I should be able to make something of myself, right? Like, I should be able to raise a family. I should be able to kind of remove myself of the traumas of my parents. I should be able to say that I'm doing something meaningful with myself. Nope. You're gonna be shopping thrift store clothing for the rest of your life. You're never gonna be able to grasp any sort of power away from the evil, greedy capitalist pigs. And that's the energy that this album captures. There's a sense of hopelessness, and sadness, but most of all, there's a sense of anger. The greatest generation, the generation that this album is named after, is usually applied to the generation that fought in World War II. But the generation that likes to tout itself as the best was the generation that raised most of my generation, the baby boomers. And they're the ones that put us in this mess, and now it feels like we're forever trapped in it. And while that genuinely great musicianship shines through, I feel like this album's message shines through even more. That it's okay to be angry about the hand that you've been dealt in life. And that means that you should never stop fighting. The Wonder Years do this amazing job of capturing that rage without ever coming across as spiteful. It just wants to live a better life, and there is nothing wrong with that. A+. Number 2, This Is Why by Paramore. Alright, I know half the Paramore fans are saying, so you really don't actually like Paramore, right? And then the other half is cheering and saying, finally, somebody gets it. This is the best Paramore album, hands down. It's got some of the best musicianship that we've seen out of them. It's got some of that intensity, but you know what? It's a very realistic take on the world right now. All without losing that personal touch that makes Paramore so great. First off, this thing is fucking groovy and danceable up and down, left and right, even when there's a level of intensity to it. This, so far, is my favorite post-pandemic album. It captures the chaos of the world around us, all while also capturing the internal chaos that Haley and her fellow bandmates are constantly fighting. There are moments where Haley has to hold the mirror up to herself and acknowledge that maybe her being famous since she was 15 really fucked up her perception of the world. She asks herself why she keeps falling for toxic men, why she feels so helpless, why she keeps falling back into the same patterns, all while saying how the world at large does the same. I would say that this album successfully brings back a lot of the intensity that we knew Paramore to have even from the very beginning. Something that was lost a little bit on the self-titled and then was especially lost on After Laughter. All while still allowing the band to reinvent itself and experiment. And I feel like people who preach about how this isn't a true Paramore record are missing a lot of the essence of what makes Paramore what they are. Changing lineup is going to change a sound, but it doesn't take away from the band's unique identity. And that's why I love this album so much, is that it captures a snapshot of the world around it. It is devastated, it is anxious, it doesn't want to leave the goddamn house, and yet it knows it has to. S. Number 1. Gee, I wonder what it could have been. What was my number 1 album of the month? What did you guys know was coming from the very beginning of the video? What is the most predictable thing I could have done for this entire video? Number 1 is The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. Look, guys, The Black Parade is an iconic pop cultural moment. A lot of people were in denial of that back in 2006. But the band absolutely fucking exploded and deserved it. This is an album that was a labor of love. The band members went through so much hell trying to make it. And I feel like there's not much I can say that can add to the discourse, besides maybe trying to analyze why it's had so much staying power, despite people saying that its legacy will fade with time. Because it hasn't, it's only gotten stronger. And that's because MCR are probably the greatest band that formed post 9/11. Like, listen, the band may not have been overtly political in their messaging, but I would say that they did a better job of speaking to an entire generation than even Green Day did. This album is about looking death straight in the face. It's about saying that this is an experience that we all have to go through eventually. The patient, the character that Gerard plays throughout the entirety of this album, it's a reflection of an entire generation of whom deserved better. The patient wanted a longer life. He wanted to get married and have children, but now he'll never see that. He has to look back on all of these profound moments in his life and ask, what was all of this even for? And it's angry, and it's sad, and it's complicated. It has tears welling up in its eyes, but also it's thankful that it got to spend any time on God's green earth to begin with. And that's the fundamental message that the Black Parade gives to its audience, and part of the reason why it's outlasted lines such as, "Some mighty sucker punch came flying in from somewhere in the back." Rest in piss, Toby Keith. It told an entire generation that it's okay to mourn what's been given to us. It's okay to grieve, but it's not okay to stop fighting. It's not okay to stop speaking out, to never lose that voice. The Black Parade doesn't shut up. Sure, Gerard Way is straining his voice. Sure, you hear all of those edited in overdubbed guitar lines in order to make things sound bigger in scope. Sure, the production is brick-walled to shit on here, but none of that matters because the messaging and the passion and the songwriting especially, it's just that damn good. MCR are an example of how a band doesn't need to be the world's most gifted musicians to give a great work of art. And we're still battling the same world we were back in the early 2000s. The slow creep of fascism, the loss of individuality, the feeling like we're never going to be able to live past our 50s because of climate change. But it's all going to be okay in the long run. And that's why I give this album an S. And there you have it. Oh man, this was a long video, and I got a long one next month to another 40 albums, and they're all Japan releases. So yeah, lots of effort having to go into lyrical analysis and all that good stuff. But the good news is that I'm in a band now myself, which means production's gonna slow down for Groovy Grab Bag. Oh joy! But I hope you guys stick around because I've really enjoyed doing this series, and I don't want to stop doing it just because I got other projects going on. I'll see you next month. Stay groovy, and remember, Toby Keith can go shove a boot up his own ass. See ya later.